The dust devil swirled across Main Street just as Zadie Richmond felt her knees buckle, the ground rushing up to meet her face before everything went mercifully dark. Isaac Ramsey had been loading supplies onto his wagon outside the general store when he saw the young woman stagger. His reflexes kicked in before his mind could catch up, and he lunged forward just in time to catch her before she hit the hard, packed earth. Her body was light in his arms, too light and burning up with fever. The basket she had been carrying scattered its contents across the street, spilling out carefully folded linens and a few precious coins that glinted in the harsh June sun of 1882. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Isaac's voice was urgent but gentle as he shifted her weight against his chest. Her face was pale beneath a layer of dust and sweat, her lips cracked from dehydration. He looked around the street, searching for help, but most folks in Granite, Colorado were taking refuge from the midday heat. The few who noticed seemed content to watch from the shade of their porches rather than get involved. "That's the Richmond girl," old Mr. Patterson called from the store entrance. "Been working herself to the bone since her pa died last month. Running their ranch all alone, trying to keep it from the bank." Isaac did not hesitate. He scooped up the woman fully into his arms and carried her toward the boarding house 2 doors down. Mrs. Chen, the proprietor, met him at the door with worried eyes. "Bring her upstairs, quickly. 3rd room on the left is empty." The older woman's voice was clipped with efficiency as she hurried ahead to open doors. Isaac climbed the narrow stairs carefully, making sure not to jostle his unconscious burden. The room Mrs. Chen led him to was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and a brass bed frame covered in a faded quilt. He laid Zadie down as gently as he could, her dark hair spreading across the pillow like spilled ink. "I will fetch Dr. Morrison," Mrs. Chen said, already turning toward the door. "Get some water and cool cloths first," Isaac instructed, his hands already working to loosen the high collar of Zadie's worn calico dress to help her breathe easier. "She is burning up. We need to get her fever down." Mrs. Chen nodded and disappeared down the hall. Isaac pulled a chair close to the bedside and studied the woman he had saved. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, close to his own age of 25. Even in her current state, he could see the strength in her features, the determination that must have kept her going long past when her body begged her to stop. Her hands, lying limp on the coverlet, were calloused and raw, the hands of someone who did hard labor day in and day out. Mrs. Chen returned with a basin of cool water and several cloths. Isaac dipped one into the water, wrung it out, and began gently wiping Zadie's face and neck. Her skin was hot to the touch, and she murmured something incoherent but did not wake. "The doctor is with a patient out at the Miller Ranch," Mrs. Chen reported, wringing her hands. "His wife says he will come as soon as he returns, but it might be a few hours." "Then I will stay with her until he arrives," Isaac said firmly. "Can you gather what you can about her situation? If she has been working herself this hard, there must be a reason." Mrs. Chen nodded and left again, and Isaac continued his vigil. He refreshed the cloth repeatedly, laying it across Zadie's forehead, then her wrists, anywhere he thought might help cool her down. Slowly, over the course of an hour, her temperature seemed to drop slightly, and her breathing became less labored. When her eyes finally fluttered open, they were the color of honey in sunlight, confused and unfocused at first, then sharpening with awareness and alarm. "Easy now," Isaac said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder as she tried to sit up. "You collapsed in the street. You are safe, but you need to rest. My basket. The linens. I need to deliver them to Mrs. Blackwell. She is paying me today and I need that money." Zadie's voice was hoarse and desperate as she struggled against his gentle restraint. Your basket is being taken care of. Right now, you need to focus on getting better. You do not understand." Tears welled in her eyes, and Isaac felt something crack open in his chest at the sight. "The bank is coming in 3 days. If I do not have the money for the mortgage payment, I lose the ranch. Everything my father built, everything my mother loved, it will all be gone." Isaac pulled the chair even closer, his expression serious. "How much do you need?" $200. The number came out like a death sentence. "I have been sewing, taking in laundry, selling everything I can spare, but I am still $40 short. I thought if I could just keep working, just push a little harder." "You pushed yourself into a fever and exhaustion," Isaac said, his tone firm but not unkind. "How long since you have eaten a proper meal, or slept more than a few hours?" Zadie looked away, tears sliding down her temples into her hair. "I do not have time to eat or sleep. I have to save the ranch. You will not save anything if you work yourself to death." Isaac stood and poured her a glass of water from the pitcher on the washstand. He helped her sit up enough to drink, supporting her shoulders with one strong arm. "When did this all start?" As she sipped the water, Zadie's story spilled out. Her father, Thomas Richmond, had died in a riding accident 5 weeks ago. Her mother had passed 2 years before that, leaving just Zadie and her father to run their small cattle ranch in the foothills outside Granite. The ranch was modest, only about 200 acres, but it had been in the family since 1870, when her parents had first come to Colorado full of dreams and determination. "Pa was so proud of that land," Zadie whispered, her voice breaking. "He always said it was not much, but it was ours. No one could take it from us as long as we could make the payments. He had the mortgage nearly paid off, just 2 more years. But then he died, and I discovered he had taken a loan 6 months ago. Some of the cattle got sick last winter, and he needed money for feed and medicine. He never told me. I found the papers after the funeral." Isaac listened intently, his jaw tightening as the full picture emerged. "And the bank will not give you an extension. I went to Mr. Harrison at the bank and explained everything. I told him I just needed a few months to get the herd to market, that I could pay him back with interest. But he said a woman alone could not run a ranch, that it was not a sound investment. He said the kindest thing would be to let him sell the property to someone who could manage it properly." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "That is a load of horseshit," Isaac said bluntly, and despite everything, Zadie let out a startled laugh. "That is what I thought too. But what Mr. Harrison thinks does not matter. He has the legal right to foreclose if I cannot pay." Isaac sat back down, studying her with an intensity that made her flush despite her fever. "What if you had help? I cannot afford to hire anyone. I can barely afford to feed myself right now. I am not talking about hiring. I am talking about a partnership." Isaac leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I have been working cattle drives for the past 7 years, saving every penny. I have enough put aside to help you make your payment and keep your ranch running until you can get your herd to market. In return, I would work your ranch with you and we split the profits when we sell the cattle." Zadie stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me. I do not even know your name." "Isaac Ramsey," he said, extending his hand. She shook it weakly, still looking confused. "And you are right. We do not know each other, but I know what it is like to lose everything. My family had a farm in Kansas. Grasshopper plague took it all in 1874 when I was 17. I have been drifting ever since, working for other people's dreams. Maybe it is time I invested in something of my own, and maybe you need someone who believes you can do this." "You are insane," Zadie said, but there was hope creeping into her voice for the first time. "Probably," Isaac agreed with a slight smile, "but I am also serious. You have 3 days until the bank comes calling. Even if you rest for just today and tonight, that still gives us 2 full days to come up with a plan and make sure all your affairs are in order. But you have to promise me you will actually rest. No sneaking out to do laundry or sewing or anything else. You let your body recover, and I will handle everything else." Before Zadie could respond, Dr. Morrison arrived, a portly man with spectacles and a kind face. He examined her thoroughly while Isaac waited in the hallway. When he emerged, his expression was grave. Severe exhaustion and dehydration, plus the beginning stages of heat stroke, the doctor reported. "Another hour in that sun and we might be having a very different conversation. She needs complete bed rest for at least 3 days, preferably a week. Lots of fluids, nourishing food, and absolutely no physical labor." Isaac nodded slowly. "She will rest. I will make sure of it." The doctor gave him a curious look. "Are you family?" "I am a friend," Isaac said, and was surprised to find he meant it, despite having known Zadie Richmond for less than 2 hours. Over the next 3 days, Isaac became a fixture at Zadie's bedside. He brought her soup from the restaurant, cool water, and even a few precious oranges that the general store had just received on the supply wagon from Denver. He read to her from the newspaper and told her stories about the cattle drives he had been on, the places he had seen, the characters he had met. Zadie protested his care at first, insisting she needed to get up to work to fix everything herself. But Isaac was immovable as a mountain, and eventually she accepted his help with a grace that touched him deeply. "Tell me about your father," Isaac said on the second day, as Zadie sat propped up against pillows, looking significantly better than she had when he had first carried her up those stairs. Zadie's eyes grew distant with memory. "He was stubborn and proud and so full of love it sometimes seemed like it would burst right out of him. He taught me everything about ranching. How to read the weather, how to doctor sick cattle, how to break a horse without breaking its spirit. After Mama died, it was just the 2 of us, and he never once made me feel like I was not enough. He never wished for a son to help him. He always said I was worth 10 sons and twice as smart. He sounds like a good man." "The best," Zadie agreed softly. "I think he would have liked you. He always said you could judge a man by what he does when there is nothing in it for him. You helped a stranger for no reason except that it was the right thing to do." "There are not enough people doing the right thing these days," Isaac replied. "Seems like everyone is just out for themselves." On the 3rd day, the day the bank was supposed to come for payment, Isaac made good on his promise. He went to the bank in the morning with Zadie's mortgage papers and his own leather pouch of carefully saved money. Mr. Harrison, a thin man with a perpetual sneer, looked surprised to see him. "I am here to make the payment on the Richmond ranch," Isaac announced, counting out the bills on the counter. "And who are you?" Harrison demanded. "A business partner. Miss Richmond and I have entered into an agreement to run the ranch together." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "That woman put you up to this. She cannot run a ranch alone, and throwing good money after bad will not change that. With respect, Mr. Harrison, Miss Richmond is not alone anymore. She has help. And unless you have a legal reason to refuse this payment, I suggest you accept it and mark her account as current." For a moment, Isaac thought the banker might refuse out of sheer spite. But money was money, and Harrison was a businessman first. He accepted the payment with poor grace and stamped the receipt with more force than necessary. "The next payment is due in 6 months," Harrison said coldly. "I will be watching that ranch closely. The first sign of trouble and I will be there to collect." "Then I guess we had better make sure there is no trouble," Isaac replied evenly. When he returned to the boarding house with the stamped receipt, Zadie was out of bed for the first time, sitting in the chair by the window and looking stronger. She stood when he entered, and the relief on her face when he showed her the receipt was worth every penny he had spent. "You saved my ranch," she whispered, touching the paper as if it might disappear. "We saved your ranch," Isaac corrected, "and now the real work begins." Dr. Morrison cleared Zadie to return home the following day, though he gave strict instructions that she was to ease back into work gradually. Isaac rented a buggy and drove her out to the ranch, following her directions along the winding road that led into the foothills. The Richmond ranch was exactly as Zadie had described it, modest but well kept. The house was a simple wood frame structure with a wide porch, and the barn and outbuildings showed signs of careful maintenance. The pastures rolled out in gentle hills, dotted with grazing cattle that lifted their heads to watch the buggy approach. "It is beautiful," Isaac said honestly, and Zadie's face lit up with pride. "It is home," she said simply. Over the following weeks, Isaac and Zadie fell into a rhythm of work and partnership. Isaac proved his worth a dozen times over, rising before dawn to check fences, doctor sick animals, and handle the heavy labor that had been slowly crushing Zadie under its weight. But he also made sure Zadie did not slide back into her old patterns of overwork. He insisted they stop for proper meals, that she sleep full nights, and that they share the burden of decision-making equally. "You know this land better than anyone," he told her when she questioned one of his suggestions. "But I have experience you do not. If we combine what we both know, we will do better than either of us could alone." Zadie learned to trust his judgment just as he learned to trust hers. When a summer storm threatened the herd, it was Zadie who knew exactly which pasture would provide the best shelter. When a difficult calf needed to be born, Isaac's steady hands and calm voice made the difference between life and death. They worked side by side through the blazing heat of July and into August, and somewhere along the way, the partnership began to shift into something deeper. Isaac found himself watching Zadie when she was not looking, admiring the way the sunset turned her hair to copper, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way her whole face softened when she looked out over her land. Zadie caught herself thinking about Isaac's steady presence, the warmth in his gray eyes, the way he never made her feel less than capable even when he was helping her. One evening in late August, they sat on the porch after a long day of moving cattle to fresh pasture. The sky was painted in shades of purple and gold, and the air had finally cooled enough to be pleasant. Isaac had made coffee and they sat in comfortable silence, too tired for words. "Isaac," Zadie said finally, her voice quiet, "why did you really help me that day?" He considered the question carefully, watching the last light fade from the mountains. "Honest answer, I do not entirely know. I saw you falling and I just moved, but afterward when I heard your story I saw something I recognized. Someone fighting with everything they had to hold onto what mattered. I have been drifting for so long, never putting down roots because I was afraid of losing them again. But watching you fight for this place, it made me want to fight too. It made me want to believe that some things are worth the risk." Zadie reached over and took his hand, her calloused fingers threading through his. "I am glad you did. I do not think I would have made it without you. You would have found a way. You are the strongest person I have ever met." "I do not feel strong most of the time. Mostly I feel scared." "Being scared and being strong are not opposites," Isaac said, squeezing her hand gently. "Sometimes being strong means admitting you need help. That takes more courage than pretending you can do everything alone." They sat like that until full dark, hands joined, something unspoken but understood passing between them. September brought cooler weather and the work of preparing for winter. They repaired the barn roof, stocked up on feed, and made plans for taking the cattle to market in Denver come spring. It also brought rustlers. Isaac was checking the northern fence line when he found the tracks. Multiple horses, moving fast, driving a section of cattle ahead of them. He followed the trail for half a mile before turning back, his jaw set in a grim line. "We lost about 15 head, he told Zadie when he returned to the house. "Rustlers, probably the same gang that hit the Morrison Ranch last month." Zadie's face paled, but she did not panic. "What do? We report it to the sheriff and we tighten our security. I will start sleeping in the barn, keep watch at night. We cannot afford to lose any more cattle, not if we want to make a good profit come spring." "You are not sleeping in the barn," Zadie said firmly. "It is freezing at night now. You will make yourself sick." "Then what do you suggest?" Zadie hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. "The house has 2 bedrooms. You could take my father's old room. That way you are close if there is trouble, but you are not freezing in the barn." It was a practical solution, but they both knew it was also more than that. In the strict social codes of 1882, an unmarried man and woman living under the same roof, even in separate rooms, was scandalous. But they were miles from town, and practicality had to outweigh propriety. "If you are sure," Isaac said carefully. "I do not want to damage your reputation." "My reputation is already damaged by virtue of being a woman who runs a ranch," Zadie replied with a wry smile. "I learned a long time ago that I have to live by my own rules out here. Anyone who wants to gossip can keep their opinions to themselves." So Isaac moved his few belongings into the spare bedroom, and they became not just partners but housemates. Zadie cooked breakfast while Isaac handled the morning chores, and they took turns making dinner. They played cards in the evening and talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. The rustlers did not return, perhaps scared off by the increased vigilance, or perhaps finding easier targets elsewhere. As autumn deepened into the brilliant golds and reds of October in the Colorado mountains, Isaac and Zadie found their lives becoming increasingly intertwined. It was Isaac who finally acknowledged what had been growing between them. They were mending tack in the barn on a cold afternoon in early November when he set down the bridle he was working on and turned to her. "Zadie, I need to tell you something." She looked up from the stirrup she was repairing, her expression curious. "What is it?" "These past few months, working with you, living here, it has been the happiest I have been since I lost my family's farm. Maybe even happier than that, because I chose this. I chose to stay here and build something with you. And somewhere along the way, my feelings became more than just partnership or friendship." Zadie's hand stilled on the leather. "Isaac, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this complicates things. I know we have a business arrangement and you might not feel the same way. But I could not keep pretending that I see you as just a partner anymore. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. I love the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating, the way you sing to the cattle when you think no one is listening, the way you never give up no matter how hard things get. I love you, Zadie Richmond, and I needed you to know that, even if you do not feel the same." For a long moment, Zadie just stared at him, and Isaac felt his heart hammering in his chest, terrified he had ruined everything. Then she set aside her work and crossed the space between them, taking his face in her hands. "You complete fool," she whispered, but her eyes were shining with tears. "I have been in love with you since you refused to leave my bedside when I was sick. Maybe even since you caught me before I hit the ground that day in town. I just did not think a man like you could love someone like me." "Someone like you," Isaac echoed in disbelief. "You are amazing. You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and I cannot imagine anyone not loving you." "Then stop imagining and kiss me already," Zadie said, and Isaac was happy to oblige. The kiss was tentative at first, gentle and questioning, then deeper as years of loneliness and longing poured into it from both sides. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "So what do we do now?" Zadie asked, still standing in the circle of his arms. "Well, I think the proper thing would be for me to court you officially," Isaac said. "Take you to church socials, bring you flowers, ask your father's permission to marry you, all that traditional business. But seeing as your father is gone and we are already living and working together, maybe we could skip straight to the part where I ask you to marry me." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Zadie's voice was teasing, but her eyes were serious. "Not yet. I want to do this right. Give me a few weeks to get a proper ring and plan something romantic. You deserve that much at least." True to his word, Isaac began courting Zadie in earnest, despite the fact that they lived under the same roof. He picked wildflowers from the high meadow and left them on the kitchen table. He made her favorite meals on days when she was particularly tired. He took her on evening rides through the most beautiful parts of the ranch, showing her the hidden places he had discovered in his months of work there. Zadie reciprocated with her own small gestures. She mended his clothes with extra care, adding decorative stitching that made them uniquely his. She baked his favorite apple pie even though sugar was expensive. She sat closer to him in the evenings, her hand finding his with easy familiarity. In December, Isaac rode into Granite alone on a Tuesday morning. He visited the jeweler and used a portion of his remaining savings to purchase a simple gold band with a small sapphire, the blue stone reminding him of the Colorado sky Zadie loved so much. He also stopped by the church and spoke with Reverend Matthews, explaining the situation and his intentions. "I know some folks in town have talked," Isaac said honestly, "about a single man and woman living together out there, but I want to make this right. I want to marry her properly, with a ceremony and witnesses and all the respectability that comes with it." Reverend Matthews, a practical man who had seen too much of frontier life to be shocked by much, nodded approvingly. "Miss Richmond is a good woman who has been dealt a hard hand. I think it speaks well of you both that you have found happiness together. When were you thinking of having this wedding?" "Soon," Isaac said. "Before Christmas if possible. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." "Then let us say December 20th. That gives you just over 2 weeks to prepare." Isaac rode home with the ring burning a hole in his pocket and a plan forming in his mind. He waited until the following Sunday, when they had finished the morning chores and Zadie was preparing lunch. He asked her to come outside, saying he wanted to show her something. "Isaac, what is this about? It is freezing out here," Zadie protested, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Just trust me," he said, leading her around to the front of the house where they had the best view of the mountains. The winter sun was brilliant on the snow-covered peaks, making the whole world seem to glow with golden light. Isaac took both of Zadie's hands in his, looking into her eyes with all the love he felt pouring out of him. "Zadie Richmond, the day I caught you when you fell was the luckiest day of my life. These past months with you have shown me what it means to build a real home, not just a place to sleep but a life with someone who matters. You are my partner in every sense of the word. You make me want to be better, to work harder, to dream bigger. I cannot imagine a future without you in it. So I am asking, right here with the mountains and the sky as my witnesses, will you marry me?" He pulled the ring from his pocket and held it up, the sapphire catching the light. Zadie's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that warmed them both despite the December cold. When they finally went back inside, Zadie kept looking at the ring on her hand, as if she could not quite believe it was real. "I spoke with Reverend Matthews," Isaac said as they sat down to the lunch that had gone cold in their absence. "He can marry us on December 20th if that works for you. I know it is soon, but I do not want to wait." "That is perfect," Zadie agreed. "Small and simple, just us and a few witnesses." The next 2 weeks were a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Chen and several other women from town, thrilled by the romance of it all, came out to help Zadie make a dress from a bolt of cream-colored silk that had been her mother's. Zadie had been saving it for something special, and a wedding certainly qualified. Isaac borrowed a proper suit from the boarding house owner, Mr. Jeffries, and made sure the house was cleaner than it had ever been. On the morning of December 20th, 1882, Isaac Ramsey and Zadie Richmond stood before Reverend Matthews in the small church in Granite and pledged their lives to each other. Zadie wore the cream silk dress and a crown of winter greenery that Mrs. Chen had woven. Isaac wore the borrowed suit and a look of complete and utter happiness. Their friends from town filled the pews, surprisingly many given how some had gossiped about their arrangement. It seemed the romance of their story had won over even the most skeptical. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews declared. "Isaac, you may kiss your bride." And he did thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone present. The wedding breakfast was held at the boarding house, with Mrs. Chen outdoing herself with food and decorations. Isaac and Zadie accepted congratulations and well wishes from what felt like the entire town. Even Mr. Harrison from the bank made an appearance, though his congratulations seemed perfunctory at best. "I hope you know what you are doing, Ramsey," Harrison said in a low voice. "Running a ranch is not easy, even with 2 people." "We will be just fine," Isaac replied firmly, his arm around his new wife's waist. "Better than fine." By afternoon, they returned to the ranch that was now officially theirs together, both in practice and in law. The winter sun was setting as they stood on the porch, looking out over the snow-dusted pastures. "Mrs. Ramsey," Isaac said, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Zadie agreed, leaning into his warmth. "Though I think I will keep using Richmond for the ranch business. Richmond Cattle Company has a nice ring to it." "Whatever you want," Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. "This is your ranch, your legacy. I am just lucky to be part of it." "Our ranch," Zadie corrected. "Our legacy, and our future." That winter was the happiest either of them had ever known. They worked together through the cold months, caring for the cattle and preparing for spring. But they also took time to simply be together, to learn each other as husband and wife, to build the foundation of their marriage on more than just practical partnership. On the cold nights, they sat by the fire and talked about their plans. They would take the herd to Denver in April, selling them for what they hoped would be a good profit. With that money, they could buy more breeding stock, expand the ranch, make improvements. They talked about children, about building onto the house, about everything they wanted their future to hold. "I want at least 3, Zadie said one evening, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder as they watched the flames dance in the hearth. "3 what, cattle?" "Because I was thinking more like 300, Isaac teased. She swatted his chest playfully. 3 children, you fool. Maybe 4 if we can manage it. I do not want our kids to grow up alone like I did after Mama died." 3 or 4 sounds perfect, Isaac agreed, his hand settling protectively over her stomach. "Though we should probably start with 1 and see how it goes." Spring came early to Colorado in 1883, and with it came the hard work of the cattle drive. Isaac and Zadie, along with 2 hired hands from town, drove their herd over the mountain passes to Denver. It was grueling work, but the prices at the Denver stockyards were better than they had hoped. After paying off expenses and the hired hands, They returned to Granite with enough money to make their mortgage payment with a comfortable cushion left over. "We did it," Zadie said as they rode back toward the ranch, both tired and saddle-sore but triumphant. "We actually did it." "We did it together," Isaac replied, "just like we will do everything else." Summer brought a surprise that filled their lives with new joy. In late June, Dr. Morrison confirmed what Zadie had begun to suspect. She was expecting a baby, due sometime in late January or early February. Isaac's reaction was everything Zadie could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around carefully before setting her down and immediately fussing over whether the spinning had been too much. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Zadie laughed, but she was touched by his concern. "I know, but I am going to take care of you," Isaac insisted. "No more heavy lifting, no more working yourself to exhaustion. We are hiring help for the busy season." "Isaac, we cannot afford to hire help all the time. We will make it work. Your health and the baby's health come first." True to his word, Isaac hired a young man named Thomas Bennett to help with the heavy ranch work through the summer and fall. Thomas was 18, eager to learn and strong as an ox. With his help, Zadie was able to ease back from the most physically demanding tasks while still being involved in the daily running of the ranch. As her pregnancy progressed, Isaac became even more attentive, if that was possible. He made sure she ate properly, rested enough, and never pushed herself too hard. He talked to her growing belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and making promises about the life they would build together. "You are going to love it here," he would say, his hand resting on Zadie's stomach. "Wide open spaces, fresh air, the best mother in the whole world, and I promise to teach you everything I know about cattle and horses and being a good person." Winter arrived again, and with it came the waiting. Zadie grew large and uncomfortable, waddling more than walking by January. Isaac barely let her out of his sight, terrified something would go wrong when they were so close to meeting their child. On a frigid night in early February 1884, Zadie woke Isaac with a hand on his shoulder and a calm voice that belied the pain he could see in her eyes. "It is time. The baby is coming." Isaac, who had faced down stampedes and storms without flinching, felt his heart leap into his throat. But he forced himself to stay calm, to be the rock Zadie needed. He rode through the dark to fetch Dr. Morrison while Mrs. Chen, who had come to stay with them for the last few weeks in anticipation of this moment, tended to Zadie. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following afternoon. Isaac paced the kitchen, feeling utterly helpless as he listened to Zadie's cries of pain from the bedroom. Every instinct screamed at him to go to her, but Mrs. Chen had been firm that he would only be in the way. Finally, as the winter sun began to set on February 4th, a new sound joined Zadie's exhausted gasps. The strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Dr. Morrison emerged from the bedroom, tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Ramsey. You have a son. Both mother and baby are doing well." Isaac did not remember crossing the room, but suddenly he was at Zadie's bedside. She looked exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly, and Isaac knelt beside the bed, his eyes filling with tears as he looked at the tiny face peering out from the blanket. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered in awe. "Absolutely perfect. You want to hold him?" Zadie asked, and carefully transferred the precious bundle into Isaac's arms. The baby was impossibly small and light, with a fuzzy cap of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through Isaac to his very soul. In that moment, holding his son, Isaac felt the last broken piece of himself heal. He had a family again, he had a home, He had everything he had ever wanted and more. "What should we name him?" Isaac asked, unable to look away from his son's face. "I was thinking James," Zadie said. "After your father, James Richmond Ramsey." Isaac looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "You remembered?" "Of course I remembered. You told me about him, about how he loved farming, how he taught you to work with your hands and your heart. I thought it would be fitting." "James Richmond Ramsey," Isaac repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much." "I love you too," Zadie replied, her own eyes wet with happy tears. "Thank you for catching me that day. Thank you for saving me." "You saved me right back," Isaac said, leaning over to kiss her forehead gently. "We saved each other." The years that followed were filled with the hard work and simple joys of ranch life. Young James grew strong and healthy, toddling after his father around the ranch as soon as he could walk. In 1886, Zadie gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Violet after the wildflowers that bloomed in the high meadow every spring. 2 years later came another son, Matthew, and in 1890, their family was completed with the arrival of their youngest daughter, Rose. The ranch prospered under Isaac and Zadie's careful management. They expanded slowly but steadily, buying adjacent land when it became available, building a bigger barn, adding onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Thomas Bennett stayed on as their foreman, eventually marrying a girl from town and building his own small house on the ranch property. By 1895, the Richmond Cattle Company was one of the most respected ranches in the region. More importantly, it was a home filled with love and laughter, where 4 children grew up learning the value of hard work, the importance of family, and the power of never giving up on your dreams. Isaac and Zadie would often sit on their porch in the evenings, watching their children play in the yard, and marvel at how far they had come from that day in 1882, when a collapsing woman and a wandering cowboy found each other in a dusty Colorado town. "You ever regret it?" Zadie asked one such evening, her hand in Isaac's as it had been for 13 years of marriage. "Spending your savings on a stranger, tying yourself to a struggling ranch and a stubborn woman." Isaac pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Not for a single second. That was the best investment I ever made. Everything good in my life started the day I caught you. My home, my family, my purpose, all of it began with you." "I think about what would have happened if you had not been there," Zadie admitted quietly. "If I had hit the ground, if no one had helped, if I had lost the ranch, I do not think I would have survived it. But I was there," Isaac said firmly. "And you did not lose the ranch. You fought for it, we fought for it together, and we won. That is all that matters." As the sun set over the mountains they both loved, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, their children's laughter rang out across the land. James, now 11, was teaching 9-year-old Violet how to rope the fence posts. 7-year-old Matthew was digging in the dirt with a stick, probably looking for interesting rocks to add to his collection. And 5-year-old Rose was picking dandelions, already planning to present them to her mother as a bouquet. This was what they had built together. Not just a successful ranch or a paid-off mortgage, but a legacy of love and determination. A family that would carry forward the lessons they had learned, that hard work and compassion were not opposing forces but complementary ones, that helping someone in need was never wasted effort, that love was worth fighting for. Isaac and Zadie Ramsey had started with nothing but a collapsing woman, a cowboy with a good heart and a desperate need for hope. They had built an empire of happiness, one day and one choice at a time, proving that sometimes the best things in life begin with a simple act of kindness and a willingness to believe in second chances. Their story would be told in granite for generations. The tale of how love and partnership could overcome any obstacle. How two people who had lost everything found a way to build something beautiful together. And every time someone saw Zadie and Isaac, still holding hands after all those years, still looking at each other with the same love and respect they had discovered in a boarding house room where a cowboy refused to leave an exhausted woman's bedside, they would remember that real love was not just about romance and passion, but about showing up, doing the work, and choosing each other every single day. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky and the children were called in for supper, Isaac and Zadie stood together on their porch, surveying the land they had saved and the life they had created. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations and difficult calving seasons, childhood illnesses and all the normal challenges of raising a family on the frontier. Through it all, they had remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other, believing in each other, and building something that would outlast them both. "Come on," Zadie said finally, tugging Isaac toward the door where warm light and the sounds of their family waited. "Let us go inside. Supper is getting cold." "In a minute," Isaac said, pulling her back for one more kiss under the emerging stars. "I just want to remember this moment, this perfect, ordinary, extraordinary moment." And Zadie, who had learned the value of rest and presence from the man who had once carried her to bed and refused to let her work herself to death, smiled and kissed him back, savoring the moment just as he asked. Because she understood now that life was made up of these moments, strung together like pearls on a strand, each one precious and irreplaceable. They had built something real and lasting, something that would echo through the generations to come. And it had all started with a cowboy who saw a woman collapse from exhaustion and made the simple choice to care, to help, to stay. That single act of compassion had changed both their lives forever, turning two lost souls into a family, a struggling ranch into a thriving legacy, and a moment of crisis into the beginning of a love story that would endure for all their days. Inside, their children were setting the table, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to feed the chickens in the morning. The house smelled of the beef stew Zadie had made and the bread that was cooling on the counter. It was ordinary and perfect, and everything they had ever dreamed of during those early uncertain days when the future seemed so precarious. Hand in hand, Isaac and Zadie Ramsey walked into their home, ready for supper and stories and the simple joy of being together. Their journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but they had made it. They had built their happily ever after one day at a time, with love and determination and an unwavering commitment to each other. And that was how a collapsing woman and a compassionate cowboy found everything they had been searching for in the wide open spaces of the Colorado frontier, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single moment of kindness and the courage to see where it might lead.